Hi, I thought I'd talk to you about why I'm doing the Walk All Over Cancer in March this year. So it's 10,000 steps every day in March to raise money for cancer research. I was very unfortunate to lose my husband in January 2019 to a very rare cancer, actually, a duodenum cancer. We obviously didn't know that when he was first diagnosed, but that's where it had primarily been based. So in November of 2018, my husband got very, very tired, and by the end of November he couldn't make the commute to work anymore. So he worked in London. He had a really very good job in London. He was a global data analyst, which is all computer stuff, which all goes over my head. But he was, working very hard, but couldn't do it anymore. Just couldn't do it. He worked from home for a bit, but then he couldn't do that either. So he went to the doctors, and he was due his regular blood test for Humira. So he had Crohn's disease anyway, so he thought he was probably having a flare up. It was probably really bad flare up, but he needed to go and see the doctor because something wasn't right. He went to see his doctor, and they eventually went to see the specialist. Did blood tests. Blood tests were all right, but then they decided that they would give him a scan to be sure. So they gave him a CT scan, and the CT showed that there was cancer in his liver. But they didn't think that was the first place where it started. They didn't think it was a primary liver cancer. So they told him about it. Now, he'd been to this scan without me. I was at work. And they told him about it. And they told him with the cancer nurse there as well, which was his cancer nurse, because when you get diagnosed with cancer, you get your own nurse that checks in on you. And that nurse stays the same throughout your journey. But he hadn't really taken it in. So when he came home and said he thinks it's pretty serious what he had, but he just didn't know what it was. And so cancer, he didn't mention cancer to me at all. He was obviously in shock, and it just hadn't sunk in what they told him. So he was then booked in for an endoscopy, just to have a look around, just to see if there was anything else anywhere else, and they could work out where it's primarily came from, where the cancer had come from in the first place. So, but obviously I didn't know that. I just thought they were just doing some more tests to find out what was wrong with him. And we went in, and they took us into a little room, and the nurse, his nurse, came and sat with us, and she said, "I don't think you took in what we said to you, and I'm so glad your wife's here. We need to talk about this." And she said it was liver cancer. It was very serious, because they don't think it was primarily in the liver either. So it spread from somewhere, and this would be a battle. And they needed to find out more. They needed to know, how bad it was, where it spread to, all these things. So you had the endoscopy that she didn't show. They couldn't find anything, because it turned out it was on the outside of a duodenum, which is where it had come from in the first place. But we didn't know that till we had the MRI scan. So this was all just before Christmas. So this was, I think it was the second week in December, maybe the third, when he had the CT. So they booked him in for a full MRI scan on Christmas Eve. So he had his full MRI scan, and obviously then everything shuts down a little bit over Christmas, and I think we waited to the 28th, I want to say. I think it was probably about the 28th when we were called up to see the oncologist in the clinic in the hospital. Okay, so we went to the clinic in the hospital for the results. So we went there, and we were waiting there about an hour, and this clinic is for cancer patients only. It's on the oncology department of a big hospital, specialist hospital. And we were waiting there, and everybody looked like they were going to die. Looked like they were either a long way into their treatment, and it was making them very ill, and they were very thin, or they looked like they were about to die. They looked so ill, and I don't say that in a mean way. I just say that this is what my impressions was. I was sitting next to my husband, who hadn't yet lost all the weight that people lose when they're very ill. He looked relatively normal to everybody else. He looked fit and healthy compared to everyone else there. And I remember thinking, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. They'll have treatment for him. He will be okay. He doesn't look like these people. He doesn't look as desperate as these people. He'll be all right. And we went to see the oncologist, and he said, you will live. This started, first of all, he said, it started in the duodenum, which is relatively rare. It spread to his liver, and it was in his lymph nodes. And he said, this is terminal. You will die from this. He was very upfront. He said, if he had to put a time frame on it, he'd say, with treatment, a year. Without treatment, 3 months to maybe 6 months. So it was terrible shock. We came out of it, and he had to go and have blood tests done for that, because they were going to book him in for the following Thursday to start chemotherapy if he chose to have it. So they needed to do his bloods and things and just get all that sort of thing ready. So he went to have his bloods taken, and I was waiting in a room sort of opposite, and I caught his eyes, and I looked at him, and we both, fixed gaze with each other. And it was a really poignant moment, and it will stick with me forever, because it was a time when it was almost like a, I know kind of look, I know, but we won't have each other for much longer. I know you're not going to be here for a lot longer. And he knew that he was dying, and it was probably the first time that we realised. Sorry, that was my dog, and she's decided that she needs to bark at everything. So where was I? So he'd said that, you have Anode and you have sort of very limited amount of time. And we discussed it. We sat and we discussed it at length about whether he was going to have treatment or not. And then he got too sick to make a decision. He suddenly became very, very ill. We were lucky we had palliative nurses came very quickly and were in place very quickly to help us. He made the decision that he didn't want a hospice. He wanted to be at home. So I gave up my job, thinking I'd have at least 3 months to care for him before he died. But things just didn't work out that way. He got very, very ill, very, very quickly. And yeah, he died within 3 weeks. So we found out he was terminal just before Christmas, and he died on the 25th of January the following year. So yeah, probably about 3 weeks really, all in all, of knowing that he was terminal before he died. The time that he was home was awful. We were blessed to be together. We were blessed that he was at home where he should be, but the pain was dreadful. Pain was awful, and I think I have read somewhere that liver cancer is possibly when the cancer is in your liver, it is possibly the most painful way to die. It was very painful, very awful, and obviously he was on Oromorph, and then eventually it was given to him other ways because he couldn't swallow anymore. But when he was on Oromorph, that gave us some adventures, because he believed that there were things in our bedroom that weren't. So he saw flying frogs and things, and I had to just let them out the window and say, oh, those frogs are in the bedroom again. How dare they? Out the window they go. And that would help, because obviously he got very upset if you said, no, that's the medicine, that's the medicine making you believe that. He would get upset about that, because he could see them. They were real to him. At one point he had a computer in the room that was basically just in front of him. He could see it, I couldn't see it, but it was touchscreen, and he could do all sorts of things. He was changing the world just before he died, and an amazing man. He was sorting things out, but with all the technology and the programming he could do, he was, you know, he was doing it in his brain. You know, it was all being done. He'd speak to people that weren't there for a long time. You know, would just and that, you know, eventually got to, I think it was the second week he was really poorly. Just probably a few days before he died. I want to say probably about 5 days before he died. The palliative care nurses, who also well, I have to say, really well. They are amazing. They said to me, look, you're not sleeping and you can't keep on doing this if you're not getting any sleep. I think they'd realised I'd got to frantic. I was just frantic all the time. And they said, well, we're going to get the Mary Carey nurses in, or a nurse in, so you can have a sleep. You know, they wanted me to have one every night. And I said, no, I'll have one for one night, just so I can try and sleep. That's okay, but I don't want one every night. And so they did get one of the lovely ladies in to sit with Kevan, and he spoke about me. He spoke to his mum, who wasn't, who's in Bournemouth. She wasn't with him, but he was quite happily having a conversation with her for hours. He was speaking to me for hours. He would stay awake and just talk all night. You know, in and out of sleep, in and out of a haze or a drug-addled haze, you know, but he was speaking. So I was very grateful for that. I think I probably got about 4 hours sleep because I was worried that I would miss. I knew he was going to die soon, and I was so well concerned he'd die on his own or with someone he didn't know, and I didn't want that to happen. And I'd said to her when she sat with him, can you please come and wake me up if he looks like he's going to die? Can you please come and wake me up? It's so important to me that I'm there. And she said, oh, she couldn't guarantee that, you know, and which she was being honest, you know, she couldn't guarantee it. She said, not all people die the same way, you know, and not everyone's dramatic. Some just die in their sleep and you don't know. And no, I was just, so then I couldn't sleep because I thought, oh, what if I missed something? So, but it was better than nothing, and I did have a little sleep, so that was good. But anyway, 5 days later, I think it was about 5 days later, he woke up in the morning and said he needed a shave, and I said to him, well, where are you going? Looking all handsome then. And he said, I think it's time, or something like that, he said. I think it's time. And he was seeing, because of the Oromorph, people in the corner of the bedroom, and those people had been waiting for him. They'd been waiting for him. And I think he said something like, this time I've got to go with them. And so I knew that day he was going to die. I knew. The palliative nurses up until this point had said, oh, no, he's got a lot longer. You're being a pessimist. I was never a pessimist. I'm always an optimist. So if I thought this was going to happen, I think it was going to happen, you know. And his sister came to be with him for a few hours on that day, and she'd just left. He'd eventually fallen asleep because he had been in so much pain all day. He wasn't comfortable, but he couldn't get comfortable. He fell asleep, and then he started making the breathing noises that are a bit different to normal breathing noises. And anyone who's lost someone and has been there will know those noises. And I just held his hand and squeezed it, and he squeezed it back, so I knew that he knew that I was there. Yeah, and I kissed his face and told him I loved him, and he died. And I wailed, yeah. And my daughter stepped in and started phoning people that needed to be phoned, and I phoned them really important people, and between us we managed to get through that. Phoned the GP, and I don't know if you know this, or whether you've had someone die at home, but it's not an emergency if someone dies at home. So a doctor does have to come out and say that they've died, basically, and before the coroner comes, not the coroner, the funeral directors come and take him. It's not an emergency, so he died at 6 p.m. on the dot because he was always on time, and nobody came to collect him until about 2, and by that time someone's dead. You know, they're dead. Whatever's making them alive is not in them anymore, which is traumatic because you see things that maybe you see things that maybe you don't want to see, you know, about someone's body someone's body's deteriorating. But also, it also brings it home that whatever that spark is, these are just bodies, whatever that spark is that makes you you, that goes when you die, that's gone. And that's an important thing. I think that was an important thing for me to see, and it's an important thing for my children to know, I think, but it was just awful. The whole thing was dreadful. I can't explain how dreadful it is. I just can't. It's trauma. And it changes the rest of your life going forward. So, the first year wasn't too bad. It was dreadful and awful and heartbreaking, and I was cleaning till 5 o'clock in the morning just to get my mind off things, or just to be doing something, just to do something. But I kept myself so busy. I moved. I rented out my house. I moved house. I found somewhere to live. I then had to do lots of things to this house that I moved into. And then immediately after someone dies, if you reverse back, immediately after someone dies, you've got to sort out all their paperwork, all their affairs. You have to ring people up, and people are awful. They're awful. So you ring people up and say someone's died. I need to have that bill transferred into my name, and you have to prove that they've died. You have to send certificates, and some people are they're just so blunt, and they make something that's hard anyway even harder. When it should be easy. It should all be easy, but it isn't. They make you jump through hoops that maybe you shouldn't have to. But that's another rant for another day. But we are all affected by cancer, is what I was trying to get to. We are all affected by it. I am in my 4th year now of being a widow. And the first year, like I said, I kept very, very busy. The second year was awful because it was also, the end of it was lockdown, and it was just, it was horrible. And suddenly you're not so busy and you have nothing to do but think about it. Third year was, again, I was very, very busy, and this year is very, very tough. And I think it's very tough because I lost my mum also last year, so it's grief likes grief, and it becomes a tsunami of emotion and loneliness, and everything that you should have done, would have done, could have done, just becomes more real to you. Anyway, as I was saying, we are all affected by cancer. Everybody's got a story like this. Some not so close to home, some close. Some people lose their children. Some people it's your mum and dad, it's your brother and sister, it's your friend. We all lose someone, and we all need to make sure that something is being done. Research continues, and we all need to take some responsibility in helping this research, because there are so many good causes, aren't there? There are so many things going on that we could help out with. I just, over Christmas, just looking at any sort of advertisement made me feel guilty, made me feel like I should be giving to that cause, I should be giving to some other cause, I should be giving to this causes I didn't even know about, but I can't do that. But I can do the things that matter to me and matter to you, and it should matter to you, because it might be you, it might be someone close to you, but it will be someone. You will know someone who has struggled with cancer. You will know someone who has died of cancer. By the time you're my age, I am 48, you will know someone who has died of cancer, and if you don't, then you're extremely lucky. So we need to do something about it, and I'm hoping that you would sponsor me, and if you're doing something like this, I'll help and I will sponsor you. Let's do something to make a difference, to stay optimistic, because if it makes the treatment better for someone, if it makes diagnosis earlier for someone, so it prevents something like this happening to someone else, I want that to happen. So let's raise some money. I will put my walks, or as much as I can do, on here, so you can see how I'm getting on, and you can sponsor me if you haven't already. And I'm doing it all for the love of my life. It's only a small thing, but it's something I can do. Mike Evan, died very young. He had the rest of his life ahead of him. We had the rest of our future together. And we've been robbed of that. Don't let it happen to someone else.